about giving money or food or shelter
Yeah.
in the form of tents to people on the street. What do you say to that?
Let me address the food one first with a bit of a story. So this is what I tell people who say I don't give money because I know I'm going to spend it on drugs, but I give them a meal deal and that can't do any harm. And you think to yourself, well, that can't do any harm. Or can it? And let me explain the damage it does. So you give someone a meal deal, you walk away, you feel fantastic. You've done your job. You go home, you feel like ringing your mum. Mum, you're right. I am an amazing son. I am an amazing daughter. Do you know what I've done today for $3.99? I'm amazing. So it's a good $3.99 you spend because you get something out of that. You get validation. You pat yourself on the shoulder. You might even take a picture of yourself giving the meal deal out and putting it on social media so the rest of the world know you're fantastic as well. What does that do to the person sat on the street? Well, let me tell you. In Greater Manchester, you can eat free for something like 10, 15 hours a day, every day. If you map where all the hostels are, all the outreach centres, all the community centres, you can eat between 10 and 15 hours a day, depending on the day of the week. No one is hungry in Greater Manchester. No one has ever been hungry in Greater Manchester when you're above sleeper. In fact, they're giving far too much food. I've sat down with individuals who have got a black bin bag next to them and say to me, do you want a sandwich, Nick? Well, no, thank you. Why? Well, I've got 17 sandwiches here because people keep buying me meal deals. And I've had the Mars bar and I've had the can of Coke, but I've got far too many sandwiches. And they're all going in the bin in a minute. But I thought you might want. They're all unopened. And it's like, no, thank you. So no one's hungry. But giving someone a meal deal, that stops them seeking out a hot, healthy meal that day in one of the centres. And it's only when we get people into those centres that the social workers and support workers can start speaking to that individual, unpicking some of their problems, working out how they can get them help and support to get them off the streets. Those conversations takes weeks and months to unpick some of these problems. So what you must understand is every time you give someone a meal deal, all you've done is stop that person getting help and support that day. That's what you've achieved.
Yeah, I think people are. I think some people are very aware of what may well happen if they give somebody money. I think that rather goes without saying. But yeah, it's interesting to look at that aspect. So effectively, if you give somebody the food that they would otherwise get in a place where they would get other support, then they are going to miss out on that support.
They are. And I say to those people, I want you to help. You're
Mm,
a kind hearted person. I want you to help, but that's the wrong way to help. How you should help, if you're time rich, then volunteer at one of the centres. And they may want you to make toast in the mornings. And you might think, well, what's the point of that? Well, if you spend an hour and a half making toast for everyone coming in the mornings, that means the support worker doesn't have to make the toast. That means the
mm.
support worker can sit on the tables when people are eating and can have informal chats with them and find out who's new and who needs help. So you making toast is giving a professional support worker the opportunity to do more good by speaking to people. Now, if you're time poor, well, instead of spending £4 on a meal deal, why don't you set up a direct debit to give £4 a month to one of the support centres? Doesn't sound a lot, but if a couple of hundred people did that, that £4 might pay for 50 people's breakfast on a day. That means something. That gets them in the shelters. And all these shelters are always short of money. That does something. You can still go to bed at night knowing you helped, you did something that was positive and productive. And then people, talk about sleeping bags and tents. So let me tell you about tents. 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, working in Manchester City Centre, opposite Piccadilly train station, big piece of grassland, and we had a mini tent city there. And my team were visiting there almost every day, trying to get people to accept help and support so we could move them on. One day we were there, and there was a young lad there. We asked him how old he was. He said, "Oh, I'm 19." And my staff went, "Fantastic, 19. If you're under 25 in Greater Manchester, we can get you accommodation that day. If you're over 25, it can take a few days. So once we understand you're under 25, it cheers my staff up because it's like, we're going to get a victory today. And that's what keeps them going, because we have many failures. But when you get a victory, that keeps you going for the next couple of weeks, knowing you're not going to help anybody. And he said, I don't want accommodation, thank you very much. We went, no, we could get it done today. But I don't want it. Why don't you want it? If I wanted accommodation, I'd go home. What do you mean you'd go home? I'd go home to my bedroom with my mum and dad. I live down the road. So what are you doing here living in a tent? He went, oh, I started hanging around with these guys a couple of months ago, and they were sharing their drugs with me. So I used to come every day, we'd share drugs and we'd have a bit of a laugh, and I liked it. And then every now and again, I was too drugged up to go home, so I'd keep in one of the tents. And I'd go home every now and again for a shower, and see my mum and dad and stuff like that. And then one day, I was sat here out of my head, and this car pulled up, and this woman ran at me with 2 bin bags and threw them at me. And she goes, there you go, love, you can have these. So I opened up one of the bin bags, and there was a sleeping bag and some sandwiches. And I opened up the other bin bag, and there was a tent. So I put the tent up and the sleeping bag, and I've not been home since. That person who thought she was doing a good deed has now enabled a 19-year-old boy who's got a bedroom at home to be able to sleep rough and take more drugs and live a negative lifestyle. They're the unintended consequences of trying to fix a problem you have no understanding of. And these are harsh words, and these are nice people trying to do a good thing, but doing the wrong thing for the right reasons is still the wrong thing to do.
That leads into something that only a few days ago, Suella Braverman said.
I've been all over the news talking about this, yeah. Yeah, she said in very clumsy words, she's a very intelligent woman. So I would imagine she picked her words very carefully. And I'm sure she knew this was going to be controversial, because I'm sure she's trying to build a reputation so she can become PM at some point in the future. Never underestimate the top politicians, that they're stupid. Everything they do, they're doing for a reason. Just because you don't understand the reason doesn't mean there's not a reason behind it. So she said that she was going to pass a law in the King's speech that would make it illegal for anybody, including charities, to hand out tents, because she didn't want tent cities springing up like in Los Angeles and San Francisco. And she said it basically as harshly as I've just said it. No context. Didn't have someone like me stood by her side with 20 years experience to be able to say it softly and explain the situation better. She just came out with it. That's why I know she did it on purpose. And then she got flack that she knew she'd get. Nasty Tories, you're evil, you want people to freeze to death in the country. I don't know of one rough sleeper ever to freeze to death in the UK. I don't know one rough sleeper ever to starve to death in the UK. So that doesn't exist. Rough sleepers die on the streets all the time. All the time. So it's not like they don't die, they do die, and it's disgraceful and we should be ashamed. But they don't die through hypothermia. We're designed to live outside. If you've got a good sleeping bag, you're fine. I'm not saying it should be acceptable. It's not acceptable, but you don't die because of it. The left jumped on her, attacked her, which I'm sure she wanted. Some of her colleagues attacked her because they don't understand rough sleeping either. That's the biggest problem with rough sleeping. It's no one understands it. So people keep doing things, trying to fix it, but you can't fix a problem you don't understand. Do I agree with her? Yes. We shouldn't be handing tents out. Just like that story I told you about, that young boy, 19 years old, who were given a tent. And let's say giving out tents did help. Let's say that's a given. Our job isn't to make a rough sleeper's life slightly easier on the streets. Our only aim and job is to get people off the streets. Spending our time funding and organising the collection and buying and giving out of sleeping bags achieves nothing when we're looking at getting people off the streets. Why are we wasting our time on something that doesn't matter? All our time, energy and money should be getting those individuals off the streets, not making their life slightly easier on the streets. That's what annoys me the most.